I am Christ, I am Disciple, aka Anson Phillip, and we're going to talk about the status of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Um, I already did some short videos on this, but I'm going to take a little time to talk to you guys about this. We're not going to do StreamYard this time. You guys can hop on as guests, but you guys can chop it up in the chat section. We're not going to take too long. So, if you did watch the shorts, if you haven't watched the shorts yet, you should check them out because basically, I'm going to give you the perspective of Warner Brothers, or what they call Warner Brothers Discovery right now. I'm going to give you the perspective from the Snyder Cut movement, and we can give you the perspective from my perspective, summarizing everything. So, let's get with the Warner Brothers perspective. First and foremost, I already kind of covered this in the short, but Warner Brothers basically initially Zack Snyder's Justice League, which what is now called Zack Snyder's Justice League, but was going to be the Justice League movie, was canon to the DCEU. The DCEU, of course, starting with Superman, Man of Steel, BVS. Those two are canon to the DCEU. That nothing's changed there. The Wonder Woman movie's canon. All right. The Studio Squad version of Suicide Squad, that is canon. Um, but when it comes to Justice League, there is a dichotomy there. Just as with the air cut of the Suicide Squad, the air cut of the Suicide Squad will not be canon. Basically, canon is anything that appeared in the theaters during the time period when it was supposed to be aired. So, in Warner Brothers' perspective, Man of Steel is canon. Batman v Superman, the theatrical cut is canon, not the director's version, not the Ultimate Edition. Um, and then for Warner Brothers' perspective, Suicide Squad, the theatrical cut is canon. Wonder Woman is canon. Um, Justice League, the theatrical cut of Justice League in 2017 is canon. Aquaman is canon. Shazam is canon, and so on and so on. Okay? So when Warner Bros. Talks about canon, it's whatever showed in the theaters at the time it was supposed to be aired is still seen as canon. Okay? That's how they look at things. As a result of that, whenever the air cut comes out, whether it's aired in theaters or not, it will not be considered canon, but like, director's cuts and that kind of thing. It's going to be seen as a director's cut or as an alternate version of the canonized version, which would be the one that you actually saw in the theater at the time it was supposed to come out. So this is Warner Brothers' stance on that. That's why when Walter Hamada said that Justice League 2017 is canon, it was from this perspective he was coming from. And I thought I'd just clarify this. Now, there was some talk about Justice League being a cul-de-sac, was Zack Snyder's Justice League being a cul-de-sac. Now, remember, Warner Bros. Didn't want to put out Zack Snyder's Justice League because they felt that there would be this kind of reaction. But it came to a point where the fans were bombarding them so much everywhere they turned. There was hashtag release the Snyder Cut everywhere. It didn't matter what they put out. It was flooded with release the Snyder Cut by fans. And as a result of that, they were forced to put out Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I'm very happily so it came out. Now, they will tell you some of the story about COVID and, HBO Max and all of that stuff. But really, HBO Max was launched off the back of Zack Snyder's Justice League, the promise of Zack Snyder's Justice League. And it was great because a new regime had come over. AT&T had bought over. It's interesting. AT&T had bought over Warner Brothers stuff in 2017 when the studio version of Justice League came out. And it was the first movie that came out under AT&T. And it was terrible. It was a box office flop. And then you had Aquaman, which was a great success, but again, was that great a movie. But the point I'm making is this: that the studio diverged from what Zack Snyder's vision was, the original. hold on a second. Okay, so what was supposed to be after Justice League actually was the Flash movie. The Flash movie with the Flash, and I guess it was supposed to sort of kind of reset things somewhat. I think Flashpoint Paradox was floated around a bit. And after the Flash movie, you were supposed to have Shazam, I believe, or it's Aquaman. Aquaman, I believe, Justice League 2, and then we were supposed to have Shazam. Then he was supposed to have Justice League 3, and then he was supposed to have Cyborg and Green Lantern Corpse. I think it was something like that. There were some untitled movies that were supposed to be in between. That was the original idea. Now, did this move somewhat to the original idea? Yes, because after Justice League, we had Aquaman. After Aquaman, we had Shazam. We were supposed to have the Flash movie, then Aquaman, then Shazam, but didn't get that. We were supposed to have Justice League 2 and 3, and then uh, we were supposed to have uh, um, Cyborg and Green Lantern, right? And what we ended up with was also we got after Shazam, we had Birds of Prey, which was supposed to be Gotham City Sirens instead of Birds of Prey. Harley Quinn got that instead of Gotham City Sirens, which was supposed to be. I think David Ayer was supposed to do something like that. And then after that, we got Wonder Woman Part Two, Wonder Woman '84, instead of getting the second Justice League movie, and I think second or third Justice League movie. And then after that, um, we got I believe the Suicide Squad. We got another Suicide Squad movie. So we got two Suicide Squad movies. They both one succeeded critically didn't do well, but financially, which is the most important part, it did well. The second Suicide Squad movie flopped, and then we got the Black Adam movie, right? So in a way, it kind of flows. It kind of flows how it was supposed to flow, but it's kind of off right now. You know, there was supposed to be some Batgirl movie. There's supposed to be a Blue Beetle movie, then the Flash movie, or the Flash movie, Blue Beetle. I can't remember which one it was. And then after that, we're gonna get the Aquaman movie, and then we're supposed to get the Shazam second movie. And it's strange seeing all these sequels for Shazam and all these things because they're not moving forward with the um, with the Trinity, right? And so with the new regime that came in power, they're pushing the Trinity all the time to get the Trinity movies, you know, because we got all these other movies with minor characters and not the major guys. Um, and so anyway, talking about this, this is the direction Warner Brothers is going. So the canon version is really Justice League 2017. This is why The Rock, even though Henry Cavill said he picked the suit and all of that, I do believe still the studio had something to do with how Henry Cavill came with the suit. And why Henry Cavill didn't come in a black suit is, again, if Zack Snyder's Justice League ends at the third part, then you probably want to keep that kind of Elseworld out there, and just keep the main course of things with the following Justice League 2017 going. So I think that's Warner Brothers' perspective. From their perspective, it's they're trying to keep these characters going and their stories going with new stories into the future. Now, do I particularly like the style and the way how things are being conducted? No, but you can see them trying to sort of get it more Snyderish as they develop going forward. Am I enthused about it? Not at all. Me personally, am not enthused about it. But this is their perspective. So that's Warner Brothers' perspective. Warner Brothers' perspective is whatever showed in theaters at the time it was supposed to show. That's canon. So basically, you know, the canon they're going by, the Superman they're going by, is the Superman that came in Justice League 2017. This is why you saw the Superman appear in Black Adam. Black Adam is going with that continuity, not the Snyderverse continuity. And the reason I say not Snyderverse continuity, because I'm talking about the Snyderverse, because Zack Snyder's Justice League is part of the Snyderverse. It diverges after Batman v Superman. So there's two Justice Leagues. The Justice League that came in the cinemas is not part of the Snyderverse. That is Kamadaverse, Whedonverse, whatever you want to call it. So that diverges. There's a divergent part. It's like it parts ways there. So from the studio's perspective, they're continuing along the lines of this Hamadaverse sort of thing, and that's where Black Adam falls. It's not a bad thing necessarily, because when you think of it from Warner Brothers' perspective and their logic, you understand why they say Zack Snyder's Justice League is a cul-de-sac, and why they probably the former regime didn't want to invest any more money in that because they feel after part three there's no continuity. That it's over. Well, you could continue with the characters, but some of the characters would not be in existence anymore, like a Batman. And even if it's a Batman, it wouldn't be Bruce Wayne. It would be Bruce Kent or something like that, right? Which is not really a big deal, but it is what it is. Anyway, so Zack Snyder Justice League, that's why they called it the cul-de-sac. Now, having said that, I still believe the Restore the Snyderverse fans now, this is what their perspective, and this is what Warner Brothers needs to understand. Restore the Snyderverse fans have never said replace what is there with the Snyderverse, right? We've not been saying that now. With the Scoopers and stuff, has been saying that, but we as fans have not been saying that. We said just let Zack finish his two movies, whether you want to call it Elseworld or whatever, and let us enjoy that, so we can enjoy something in DC, so every fan in DC can enjoy something, right? But as of late, the DC films have not been doing well. Okay, at the box office, theatrically, they have not been doing well at all. Okay, and Black Adam, people saying it's doing well. It's not doing well. Okay, um, we're gonna find out what its box office looks like this weekend, and hopefully it does well enough so it can stay afloat and then it can make some money. Um, the Batman is not a DCEU film. It did all right. It did all right. $700 million, nothing to sneeze at. It made some profit. Um, but for a Batman film, of course, people are going to say that for a Batman film, it didn't do well enough, which is true, but it still made some money. Okay, so can Black Adam make some money? It doesn't have to do anything dramatic; just has to break even to break the curse of these DCEU films not making any money or making any profit. We know that Dwayne the Rock Johnson, $7 promotion and that kind of thing. They're kind of independent a little bit from, uh, you know, the from the DCEU, kind of like that. What's our motto? Didn't have full control over it. They had kind of a certain say and control. They went through New Line Cinema still, and of course the feel of the film would be better than it probably was before, especially given the fact that they put a lot of money into it and they really invested a lot of time. You can tell Dwayne the Rock Johnson's a big fan of the Snyderverse and what Snyder does, and the directors and all those people, which is why he even brought back Henry Cavill, which is also very awesome. But you have to understand, still the tone of the film. I could pick up from the get go that this film is still like studio, like people say, Suicide Squad, Studio Squad, whatever you want to call it, 2016. It's just like Justice League 2017. It's the same kind of sort of this mesh of thing. So it's not properly directed or produced because it's got all studio interference in it. Let's just put it that way. And so, I'm sure Dwayne and they had the original version of it was probably much better. But, studio interference, that kind of thing. Um, I'm sure Dwayne would have loved to have been part of the Snyderverse and continued there. Um, his hands are kind of tied, got to play politics, whatever. But at the end of the day, Warner Brothers was never going to allow, probably from their perspective, they probably were never going to allow Dwayne to bring back Black Suit Superman in there. Even if it's a Man of Steel suit, black suit, or a BVS black suit, it doesn't really matter. They probably wouldn't going to let him coming back, bring Henry Cavill back in there with the black suit. Now, I'm just being straight with you guys. Because, again, from their perspective, that's not canon, right? Unless you want to follow an Elseworld story, that had, in their opinion, has an ending. Which I don't believe that, because that same story would have been told given the original slate, and they would have still moved on. The DCU would have still moved on. Just that you probably wouldn't have had a Bruce Wayne Batman anymore. You would have had a Bruce Kent or something like that, right? Or whatever, right? So, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, I don't even care. Snyderverse fans don't really care. We just want to see the Snyderverse completed. So to restore the Snyderverse that we talk about from our perspective is just that Zack Snyder gets his Justice League 2 and 3 done. Okay? In addition, we want the air cut because the air cut kind of bridges it. We want to hear the director's vision for the air cut. Of course, there are other stories that can still be told in the Snyderverse, even though the story has an ending. You can go retroactively look at Dark Side and New Gods like they wanted to do. We could look at the Atom. They had Atom Smasher and stuff. They could nuclear the Atom. We also know that Jeff Johns, did sabotage the DCU, which is why Marvel even now has a brain drain, sort of like. What I don't really appreciate, even though people talk about the DC Marvel crossover that could possibly happen, what I don't really truly appreciate is the fact that you have a head of a guy who's working for Marvel right now, which is totally in my opinion, it's just a, it's just a, it's a contradiction of interest because uh, James Gunn is currently putting out Guardians of the Galaxy this Christmas, and he's the head of DC Films. How could you be the head of DC Films and you're putting out a Marvel flick? It just doesn't make no sense to me. Because if you're the head of DC Films, that means you'll know the direction DC is going. What's to stop you from letting the head of Marvel know what's going on? I don't like it. I don't like it. Jeff Johns was cozy with Kevin Feige as well, telling all the secrets of DC. Giving away all the plots and everything. It's just not cool. And to see this happening again is not cool again. You know. Um, so, anyways, James Gunn is tight with Kevin Feige. Marvel has been stealing ideas from DC for the longest while. Now DC doesn't really have any ideas, so Marvel's kind of down in the tubes as well. But quite frankly, not to go beyond 20 minutes on this topic, the Snyderverse fans don't care about all that. We just want to get Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3. You know, we love to see Ben Affleck do his movie, but we do not want a Batman movie that's in the DCU proper. We want an Elseworld Batman movie where that Batman feeds off of the story that Zack Snyder set up in Zack Snyder's Justice League. We don't want no. I understand Warner Brothers wanting to continue with Batman and just keep going with Batman and maybe have another guy, Batman hand the baton across and another guy start Batman. I understand all of that, but we don't want that. As fans, we restore the Snyderverse fans, we want to see the Batman movie that we were supposed to get. Okay? And so there are certain movies in the Snyderverse, and this is why I say restore the Snyderverse, because it sets up Justice League 2, it sets up Justice League 3, it also sets up an Atom movie, it also sets up a Batman movie. Okay? Um, and those things we want to see. And of course, having Darkseid in there, it sets up a New Gods movie. So, when we talk about the DCEU and when we're talking about our perspective from Snyderverse fans, Warner Brothers has to understand and appreciate. We think that there are a lot of stories that can be told, even if the story ends at a certain point. There are prequels and there's all kinds of stuff that can be told still. It's kind of like with Star Wars. You can tell endless amount of stories from the Star Wars story. Well, similarly, you can tell endless amount of stories from the Snyderverse, and this is why we don't see the Snyderverse as a cul-de-sac. We see it as an alternative way to be able to be entertained. Now, Warner Brothers talks about one Superman, one Batman, one Wonder Woman. So that means they're going a long line of the DCEU as it is, not no Elseworld stuff. Even though they have a Batman sort of storyline, a trilogy that Matt Reeves is doing, and then there's also the Joker sequel that's going on, which are not DCEU films. Now, the thing about it is, as much as Zack Snyder's Snyderverse, at least from Justice League onwards, uh, is not going to be in the main DCEU. It's still a DCU something. It's just an Elseworld DCU story, and I think they need to understand that. And Warner Bros. Needs to tap into that because Zack is just. I'm telling you, man. Anything Zack, you just say Zack Snyder, and it brings a lot of excitement and just a lot of interest. And so it's in their favor now. The question will be, if we put Zack Snyder Justice League into theaters, for example, right? What does that mean? Well, it's Zack Snyder's Justice League going into theaters. Remember, this Elseworld story uh, would not be a problem because it's an Elseworld, right? And if you want to explore more possibilities in that Elseworld, fine. But at the end of the day, it's an Elseworld story. So even if Zack Snyder Justice League breaks, let's say it breaks $1 billion, right? It goes into the cinemas, it breaks $1 billion, right? Everybody's watching the movie, and people have seen the movie already, but it just never saw it on a big screen, in IMAX. Breaks $1 billion, easy. Erica goes in, breaks $1 billion, easy, right? Now, Zack Snyder, here's the cool thing that Warner Brothers would have done. They would have made back a bunch of money, right? They'd have made back a ton of money off of the movie, those two movies, and it puts them in a much favorable position to make high quality films from there on in. Whatever they plan to do, whether they can continue in the Hamadaverse, whatever. But it also opens the door for the possibility of certain fans that may not appreciate the mainstream DCEU, even though some people are warming up to it with Black Adam. So hopefully, some Snyder fans might even watch some of the DCEU films, right? But if you also provide an Elseworld alternative, a Snyderverse alternative, right? And the Snyderverse turns out to be lucrative, I'm not telling you to abandon your Hamadaverse. Maybe the Snyderverse can fund the Hamadaverse. Who knows? But you could tighten up your Hamadaverse a bit, get it clean and better, and pursue that. So that you have your 10-year plan and your Hamadaverse thing, which is what it looks like you're going to do anyway. And now here's the thing: people talk about, like, I hear Scylla and all these guys talking about the Snyderverse. They're trying to get back to the Snyderverse. They're trying to get back to the Snyderverse time. It's not possible to do that with the Flash movie because, well, you probably could do it. You probably could do it, but it takes a certain skill. It takes a certain talent. It takes a certain amount of coordination. And I don't know if they're willing to do that. I don't know how willing they are to restore the Snyderverse timeline like that, right? I could see the Snyderverse being restored and it running on its own trajectory as an Elseworld thing. I really can't see them, especially with how the way how Warner Brothers thinks about things, putting that back on the rails with the Flash movie. I don't even know if the Flash movie will even be, they're talking about, still, and they were talking about massive reshoots and stuff, but I don't know how much sense that makes. You have to keep your DCEU following. It's still going to have to follow Justice League 2017 because that's the thing that came in the theater. Unless you're just going to suddenly change up the script and say, okay, we're going Elseworld back again, which could have happened. It's just that you know there is a Zack Snyder's Justice League does have an end to it, and Zack said that himself. Not to say that it's an end, but he's done with it. He's done with his story, and you can move on from there. So it's interesting. I don't know if Warner Brothers, the direction I believe that the direction they're going to go is the DCEU as they're going. Okay, because there's no indication to me that they're going to cross over to the Snyderverse. I don't see that happening. I see. I saw David Zaslav bring back, you know, a lot of the actors, but the roles that the actors have been playing so far, and all I got is Henry Cavill to go with, have not been Snyderverse characters. Okay, so Cavill even came back with a curl. He's in like Christopher Reeves like Superman. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem with that. I'm just saying he didn't continue from the black suit. He didn't continue from Zack Snyder's Justice League. As much as they talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League, as much as bring it up, to write it, whatever, that wasn't Zack Snyder Justice League Superman, and it's just what it is. And remember, Justice League Part Two hasn't come out yet, so you can't be doing that. You either staying with the mythos that and if you say it's canon, then you have to stay with the canon. But they didn't. So I believe that Warner Brothers is moving in the direction where Zack Snyder's Justice League is an Elseworld story. You can finish that separately, but um, the canon is the movies that appear in theater. I think that's how they're going with it. So for me, as a Snyderverse fan, my opinion. So I told you the Snyderverse fans, their opinion is just give me back Zack, bring back Zack into to do his own Elseworld stuff. We don't really care if he's in the main DC. We don't gotta do no Man of Steel, nothing. He doesn't have to do all those Man of Steel films. The only thing is, but Ben Affleck better have his Batman in the Snyderverse. We want a continuation from Zack Snyder's Justice League with the Batman that Ben Affleck is doing. And Henry Cavill Superman, that's kind of independent of whatever. If Henry Cavill really wants to do a Superman thing in between to show how good Superman is before he goes back into the dark side thing, I hope Henry Cavill can keep with the Zack Snyder Elseworld Justice League canon, because Zack Snyder's Justice League is still Elseworld. So he has to think about that, and he has to think about how he's actually going to put it together, or if he's going to actually run a Superman story that is along the lines of the mainstream what they're doing. So it's not even connected to um, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and therefore not connected to what Zack is telling. And then he show up as Superman and what Zack is telling. So yeah, they have to figure that out. They have to figure out if they how they're going to do the continuity, if they're going to do the continuity with Zack Snyder's Justice League, or they're going to, and so if Henry Cavill's coming back, is he the Elseworld Superman? And it's kind of weird to say because it all starts with Zack Snyder's Justice League as Elseworld, which is sad because that should have been canon, but it's not, according to Warner Brothers. To us, the fans, it is canon. It's a superior product to that, but Warner Brothers for some reason is not thinking like that. So um, that's what I got to say. In my personal opinion, I'm not really interested in the DCEU proper. If you want to call it Zack Snyder Justice League Elseworld, I'm interested in that and what comes off of that. And so, there are a number of movies that can come off of that. Like I said before, you got the Batman movie, Deathstroke movie, you got the Adam movie, New Gods movie that can come off of that, which I would love to see, by the way. Um, you could have a Green Lantern movie come off of that even. So I mean, a Master Man Hunter movie come off of that. I mean, you could have a ton of movies come off of the Elseworld, because it's not considered canon, the Elseworld thing. And as Snyderverse fans, obviously we would love to see all of them because we know they'll be interesting, and the stories would be well established and well done, well worked out. Versus what's happening in the DCEU, which we think is substandard to what the Snyderverse was offering. Um, but does that mean that the other DCU stuff can now? Some people are thinking, well, Warner Bros. Would be worried that they can even sell stuff in their DCEU, and some fans will be afraid that the Snyderverse will replace some of the things that the DCEU already has. So I can understand that, even though those fans are probably not the majority of fans. Um, so to satisfy both fans, I guess they could have the DCEU if it's profitable to them, or if they continue to lose money with the DCEU. They probably will need to shut it down or sell off Warner Brothers Discovery to probably Disney, which is a much bigger company. But me personally, I think that the Snyderverse is doable. I think it can happen. Definitely, probably be an Elseworlds scenario, which could be built upon or not. Maybe we just get the bare minimum, which would be Zack Snyder's Justice League 2 and 3, probably the air cut, and maybe Ben Affleck's Batman movie, as Ben Affleck wants it. You know, from kind of following through with the Snyderverse, and probably that's it. Or maybe that they see how lucrative the thing is and branch off other things from it, while still keeping the main course DCEU intact, and maybe doing a crossover with that one versus with Marvel versus what the Snyderverse might be. But me personally, I think it's more profitable to them. It's more sensible to them to keep the Snyderverse going. That's where I think most people's interest would be, and it would do exceptionally well. But we have to see what'll happen with the Rock's movie, Black Adam, and based on what happens with Black Adam, at least if it could break even or turn a small profit, um, that would be good because then that means that maybe the Hamadaverse can continue, and then people can kind of really continue to tell their stories as they want to. Anyway, this I just wanted to chop up a little bit with you guys, let you guys know a little bit about explaining a little bit more. Those were the three different perspectives: the Snyderverse fans' perspective, my perspective, and of course Warner Brothers' perspective on Zack Snyder Justice League and how canonized it is. I'm gonna catch you guys later. I'm Christ Samuel Sub, aka Anson Phillip. You guys have a good afternoon. Peace.